I'm pissed. And I very well should be. In fact, I think a lot of us very well should be. It is on the day that I'm filming this, November 7th, so it is 2 days after the United States presidential election. And I wasn't totally sure if I was going to actually make this episode and talk about it this way. But upon reading the Daily Stoic today, it felt like it was the right thing to do, the right time to do it. So, why am I making this? And why am I so upset? And why am I not alone in that? Well, keeping everything simple, let's go over today's Daily Stoic and what a little bit of optimism means in terms of getting us back on track and helping us stick around for fighting for our future. Let's dive right in. Welcome back to the Keeping Everything Simple podcast. I'm your host and fellow student, Michael Klukas, and on this show, we boil down complicated topics into simple and actionable tips. Now, no, I'm not going to be doing election analysis or anything like that on here. If you want to get a good deep dive in that, go check out Hassan Piker on the Hasanabi YouTube channel or check out his live stream where he does plenty of deep dives into this and has a lot better takes on this than I do. But what I can say is, as a second-generation immigrant, I'm pissed. And I know that I'm not the only one because there's so many other disenfranchised groups, whether that is women, whether that is immigrants, whether that is just other POC minorities. There's so many people that are upset. And again, understandably so. So what happens, though, when life takes a sudden 180? When we knew that there was a chance of this happening, we just hoped and prayed to God that it wasn't going to be the outcome that was, the one that happened. And like I said, the reason why I opted to make this episode was because of the Daily Stoic. And Ryan Holiday is the author of the Daily Stoic. And he has a good example for today. So I'm going to pull it up on screen. So for those of you who are watching this, you'll be able to kind of read along with me as I go through it. But imagine believing in some ideals your whole life, that your family has been committed to a vision of your country for generations. You know your country isn't perfect. You know not everyone agrees with you, but you are confident that when it comes down to it, things will turn out all right. Now imagine waking up one morning and find the person you find most morally reprehensible, who stands for everything you stand against, is now in charge. Which, yes, is very much so how I feel about Donald Trump. But also, I do accept the outcomes of the election, and it's just something that, like Ryan says, we know the country isn't perfect. We know that there is work to do. We know that life can be better, but currently, he's in charge. Or he will be in charge once the transfer of power occurs. But he then goes in to talk about how, while for some this might all sound rather contemporary, this is the story of Cato the Younger and takes place in Rome in 46 BC. Cato was the Stoic all other Stoics admired. With an almost radical commitment to virtue and principle, he defended Rome's old ways, the mos morium, and led the opposition against Julius Caesar, who was determined to seize ultimate power at all costs. And when Caesar and his followers defeated Cato's side in Rome's Civil War, bringing an end to the Republic and the start of Caesar's dictatorship, how did Cato respond? And yes, emphasizing this now, Julius Caesar, not exactly the best leader, best guy. I, again, don't have the full history of it at my fingertips or that I can pull up on the whim, but notably, yeah, the guy was assassinated by his peers around him for good reason. But how did Cato respond? He called for his sword and checked its razor edge with his finger. Now I am my own master, he said, and then he killed himself in protest, preferring to die than submit to what he considered tyranny. Now, I want to stop right there for a second. Hearing that and reading that this morning, my first thought was Cato, as an example, stood for virtue, principle, and the common good. That is what he stood for. Was his life an example to live by? On that front, yeah. By choosing to put the good of the people above all else, to put the good of his neighbor above his own desires, those were good things. And that's something to be admired. That's something to be proud of. But what about his choice? Was his choice to take his own life and to be his own master in that way the right one? Well, I don't think so. I don't think that was the right call. And that's something that Ryan talks about further into the Daily Stoic, because then as we go through it, he then talks about how Cato's example in life and in death has long stood as a powerful one. It inspired not just the other ancient Stoics, but also the founders of America. He was pure, he was determined, he was powerful, and it's also understandable. He was devastated. All felt lost. He himself was in danger, and he didn't want to become a victim of Caesar and the dictatorship that he knew was going to follow. And when Ryan says that this feels all very contemporary, that is very contemporary for so many of us, where we're worried about what's to come. Donald Trump somehow managed to win the popular vote, and that's the first time in 20 years that has happened. That someone who can stand for something and for so many causes that threaten our neighbors, threaten our friends, our families. We don't want to become victims of that type of leadership. But going further into the Daily Stoic, he talks about, our profile of Cato in the Lives of the Stoic, although largely sympathetic to Cato, presents an alternative view to his final protests, by the way of Napoleon of all people. Napoleon, who once displayed a bust of Cato in his Hall of Hero, notes, "The conduct of Cato was applauded by his contemporaries and has been admired by history. But who benefited from his death? Caesar did. Who was pleased by it? Caesar. And to who was it a tragedy? To Rome and to his party? No. He killed himself out of spleen and despair. His death was the weakness of a great soul, the error of a Stoic, a blot on his life." Now, I want to pause here for a second and say that for anyone struggling with mental health or any crisis regarding just the outcomes of this election or just in general, there is hotlines located in the description down below. So please use those, check those out, because as we're talking about this, I'm aware that this is a heavy subject in general, and I want to make sure that you guys have the resources necessary in the event that you need extra support that I can't give through this, but that is available and is out there. So those lines and those resources are going to be available in the description down below. So continuing on with this, Ryan obviously notes that now Napoleon is not a perfect character himself, much closer to Caesar than anything, but he's got a good point here. What if Cato had stuck around? What did his suicide, literal or metaphorical, accomplish? Nothing. And was the end of him, or it was the end for him anyways. And that is important because Napoleon calls Cato weak in the end. When you give up the fight, that is when things truly stop. When you give up the opportunity and the chance to make something different, to make change happen, that is when everything truly comes to an end. Now, I don't want to say that it doesn't, in terms of especially Cato's life and the experience that he had, make sense. He didn't want to become a victim. He was devastated, and he'd been fighting for so long. The strong can fold. The strong can break. That's something that we're all well aware of, but sometimes we take for granted because we tend to lean on those in our lives who we feel are our rocks and our supports. And they're not always going to be at their best. They're not always going to be at their A game. And so the chance for change, like I said, it ends when you give up. There's so many quotes that you'll see online. There's so many different, motivational YouTube videos or books that kind of emphasize this idea of it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up and keep pushing forward, which I have no clue where that comes from. I'm pretty sure it was like Rocky or something, or at least that was the most motivational video I saw on it. But it's true, because the chance for change ends when we no longer have the stamina or the will to keep on fighting, to keep on pushing. And that's why it's so important that we have people to lean on, to have a good circle of support, to know that we're not trying to just get through this on our own. We're not trying to weather this storm without anyone else. Instead, we're trying to do this with, again, our neighbors, our friends, our families, those we hold dear to us. Because, in the end, Cato's death wasn't something that helped his life or helped his party, helped those around him. It only helped the person in power who was coming after him. But as we continue going through the last bit of the Daily Stoic, Ryan notes that, and so we should all stick around, metaphorically and literally. Perhaps this election did not come out the way you hoped. So, doesn't that make you sticking around even more important? Stay in the fight. Try to make a positive difference, even if your options are limited. Do your job, as we said recently. Don't give up. In this regard, don't follow Cato's example. Keep fighting for virtue and the common good. We still need you in the game. And I like emphasizing that ending, because we are fighting for our future. This is something that we, I believe, all inherently understand. No matter who you voted for in the election, we all are fighting for what we think is going to be the best future for us. However, yes, this is America. We are hyper individualistic. That is kind of the founding principles about what we stand for. But when we're fighting for our future, fighting for change, it is change for the better, change for the masses, for all of us, not just a select few. It shouldn't just be a select few. So that's why it's important to just remember that even in the Daily Stoic, as Ryan talks about it, is that we need to keep fighting for the virtue and the common good. The common good means for all of us. Yeah, it's frustrating. Yeah, there's people that definitely don't agree with this. And yeah, there's people that want, those that look like me dead or gone. I recognize that. A lot of other communities that suffer from that recognize that. And the unfortunate part is that that's not something that can easily be escaped. But if we want to fight for our future and create change, it happens when we stand up for it. When we, as Ryan Holiday puts it, keep fighting for virtue and the common good. We still need you in the game. We can't have so many of us checking out and not choosing to stand up for what is right, what we know is right. And that's a scary thought. Now, Hassan Piker, if you know who that is, one of the largest North American leftist content creator, he has a much better take on, again, so many things of the election than I can offer you. But he has an important note for so many of the things that go wrong. It's understanding that the system as a whole, it's messed up. And there's very little we can do to deny that. But we can still make changes to the system, within the system, and we can still succeed within it. Because think of it like the rules of, Mario Kart or Legend of Zelda. There are rules in place that dictate how the world works, how the system works. And you can be successful within them. You can play the game the straight and narrow way. You can follow all the rules to a T. Or you can do it like a speedrunner would. You can find bugs and glitches and loopholes and push the bounds and do something completely new, even if it's still technically within the bounds of that system. You've created something new. You've changed it. The underlying foundation and principles might not have, suddenly morphed into something new, but you have taken what was created and you have made something new. So it's possible, but it requires work. It requires, of course, a lot of grit. And I know we're tired. A lot of us are tired. But this is also when we should be focusing so much more on getting organized together, making things count, making our voices count. Because even though the system is messed up, we can still succeed within it. And when there are things worth fighting for, like, again, virtues and the common good, it takes a movement. It takes everybody. Of course, there are people that are going to stand against it. As we talk about Cato and Julius Caesar, there are those that stand for something that is good, something that is for the betterment of society and the betterment of all people. And then you have those who stand just to gain their own power, just to gain more and more notoriety, to hold on to their earthly desires and hold on to greed and putting down others around them. And those are things worth fighting against. So, like I said, I wasn't sure if I was going to actively make this video, if I was going to actively talk about the election. But the saying goes, democracy dies in darkness. And when we don't actively communicate, when we don't actively have hard conversations with each other, when we don't actively push for popular measures that lift us all up, because a rising tide lifts all ships, then we do ourselves a disservice. We do our neighbors a disservice. We do our friends, our families, our loved ones a disservice. And I'm aware that there's going to be probably plenty of hate comments in this video as a whole for me saying that I think Donald Trump is, again, very similar to Ryan Holiday, morally reprehensible. I think the guy's awful. But at the same time, I want to make sure that I'm doing my part, however small it is, however local it is, to make sure that I am looking out for those around me. That I am looking out for the ones I want to have, that I want to have a better future than my own. Like my kids, my future grandkids. I should say future kids. But you get the point. Me being able to say that everything is on fire, everything is pointless, doesn't do us any good. It doesn't help us. It doesn't push us in the right direction. It just allows those with the largest stick and the loudest megaphone to take control of what comes next. So, in the end, what happens when life suddenly takes a 180? We push forward. We find what's worth fighting for. We find what's worth standing up for. We help those around us. We make sure that we are charting a better future. Because, now that a second term has been confirmed, that means that's the limit. That's the end of that. And to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again, that requires all of us. That requires true change. That requires lifting up everyone. And again, I'm not the best person to do deep dives into, again, the political landscape, but as a whole, this is something that I can speak to when I say that there are, again, so many of us who are scared, so many of us who are worried. And that's understandable. That's valid. But we can't give up. We can't choose to exit out of the game or write this off as the final chapter. Because everything stops when we give up. When we don't choose to stand up one more time and try again, have another do-over, take that one up and hit the level with everything we got. Because in the end, we can make something better. But we have to push for it. We have to message on that. And I believe we can. I believe we will. But I believe that it's going to take work. I believe there's going to be a lot of hardship that comes with it. Because the things worth doing are worth doing well and are often the hardest things. But take solace in the fact that we're not alone. There are so many communities that want positive change, that want to fight for the common good, and that want to see life rebound in a more positive direction, see our country rebound in a more positive direction. Again, I'm a second-generation immigrant, and so I can understand that, hey, statistically, by the third generation, full assimilation occurs in every aspect. And that still means that I want to lift up those who come after me. And I know you guys do as well. So, in the end, things might get worse before they get better. I admit that. But I also believe that they still can get better. And that is a decisive and intentional optimism. That we can make a true difference as long as we don't give up. But with that, keeping everything simple, have an amazing day, you amazing people. I will see you all in the next episode. I hope you go out there, you don't give up, and you do great things. I'll see you next time.